Hey everybody, it's Ross Webb here from the Product Coach Podcast. Today I'm super excited because I'm with Ken Sandy, who's the author of The Influential Product Manager, a book I read and really enjoyed because as a listener of the Product Coach Podcast, you probably know how much we talk about leadership and how to progress with your career. Ken, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, dude. So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you end up in a
Yeah.
position where you could write about being an influential product manager?
Well, it started by becoming a product manager through one of the routes that many of us did, and that is I kind of fell into it. So I remember I actually studied engineering back in Melbourne, Australia, so that's why I got the accent. And I kind of enjoyed the technology component, but I thought something was missing, and I actually ended up working for a consulting company and learned a lot more about business and the decisions that were being made and strategy. And I really enjoyed that, but I kind of missed the execution component. And so I joined a company, a startup in Melbourne, Australia, and kind of fell into this product management where you get to do all of the above and really, really loved it. That company relocated to San Francisco, where I now live and where I'm coming from today. And I just really loved being a product manager, but realized that just doing the job well, having the skills, being able to sort of ship product was just a fraction of what it actually takes to be successful. And so over the years, I kind of very organically learned the skills and made mistakes and sort of figured out that actually being able to um, broadly, influence people, and that means not just kind of helping them understand like context or encouraging certain behaviors or actions or outcomes. It's actually about winning hearts and minds by really being able to tell a great story about what it is that you're building and the impact you're going to have in the world, and really motivating and getting people going in the same direction. That's such a hard skill to do well. And so what I've ended up doing is kind of distill down all of those lessons so you don't have to learn it quite as organically as I did.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell me something. I don't want to start on a negative, but what do you think that product managers get wrong about influence?
I think they get a couple things wrong about influence. I see. I'll give you. I'll maybe do two counterpoints. One is that that influence can easily slip into a really negative, unhealthy zone of, frankly, manipulation if you're not careful.
Sure.
Playing politics is not influence. Trying to get somebody to do something that is primarily not in their interest, is not aligned with their goals, or it's not something that you're maybe not telling the full story. That's not influence. So influence really is being able to put together all of the pieces of data and telling a great story around that. It is about being able to provide context, and it's actually a lot about letting go, letting the decisions go, and other people stepping in and owning. If you can create that environment for amazing collaboration, that's influence. And so it is not about control, and that's I think what I think a lot of young product managers get wrong. I will add another thing that I think that they get wrong, and that is that influence is not about driving towards a specific solution or rallying around a specific idea that you have. It is, in fact, product managers don't add a lot of value, in my opinion, by simply thinking about having all of the ideas or trying to come up with a very specific solution and drive, a team to execute it. It is a lot about helping the organization understand the context of the customer, finding really great opportunities to go solve, and then really collaborating with others to sort of allow the solutions to emerge around that. And I think when you let go of those sorts of needs, if you will, they're very human needs, right? And you emphasize trying just to get to a really great answer and seeing yourself as sort of someone who can kind of steward that process along, it's actually quite liberating, and it makes influence actually a lot more tangible.
It's really interesting. So, for example, when my daughter sent me a TikTok yesterday saying, "Daddy, if you love me, you will do a video of this dance." It was actually in the TikTok. It wasn't her saying, "Daddy." She just sent me the TikTok and said, like, "So where's my video, Daddy?" Like, would that be influence or manipulation?
Well, it depends. It seems well, for a start, like what's in it for you? Is this something that you would love to do? And like maybe you're winning your daughter's love, and like you're quite happy to do that. It is actually always a judgment call, right? You're primarily, if you have strong, trusted relationships, and a daughter and a father would, you can ask for anything because you know that there's at its core something that's good, something that's very meaningful. And I talk a lot about influence. In fact, in the second chapter, I go directly to, let's not talk about building products. Let's not talk about like trying to kind of do planning or working with engineers. I focus almost exclusively on build your relationships first. And if you build those relationships first by having genuine interest in what others' goals are and how your product may or may not fit into their life, to understand how different stakeholders, for example, wish to engage with you or the process or communication styles, for various like behaviors that you can exhibit, and you will build strong kind of trust, and they include things like being proactive with updates or being not the squeaky wheel. Like that's a terrible trait for a PM. So if you build those relationships first, influence really can flow a lot easier because you have kind of a strong foundation, and so that's why I start there.
That's awesome. So, how? I mean, I know it's in the book, and I don't want you to give too much away of the book.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about it all day.
No, it's cool. I've read it. I really think it's awesome. So, a lot of the time, one of the complaints that I get a lot from, let's say, people are probably at the senior product management role, and I know this is kind of leading the witness a little bit. Just bear with me. It's kind of, they'll come and say like, well, Ross, you're always talking to me about being a leader and stuff, but I don't have any direct reports. Okay. And I think there's a major misunderstanding about leadership and having to have direct reports. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think direct reports or getting a team is a kind of a consequence of actually being a leader first. And I'll sort of throw out a quick little framework to sort of contextualize this. Having responsibilities is sort of the first step. You need to actually be, assigned responsibilities. And usually they start, particularly for an IC, it's independent contributor. It's going to be a lot to do with, frankly, probably even execution to start with, and then move over time into more ownership over the product strategy and the metrics that you're trying to drive. And then it's only after doing that repeatedly that you're building these sorts of hard technical skills, being the skills of product management, of the doing of product management, that you start applying those skills on an ongoing basis. And then you have to do that multiple times to ship multiple like meaningful product improvements or initiatives. And then you've got to turn around and have impact on the business. So we're already 3 layers up now. You've got experience, skills, development, driving impact. And then you start actually being seen, and this is an important distinction, seen by others as an influential leader in your organization. And that's a key thing to understand about leadership and or influence is it's not what you think, it's what others think. When they see you as a leader, which can only come by continuously driving impact for your organization and for your customer, will you be seen to be a leader? And then what naturally flows from that is a step around more like mentorship or guiding, you start being invited into the conversations. You start being asked to sort of help on other initiatives or maybe other product managers or even outside of your organization. For me, it was a lot of helping the marketing department do something or going and working with CS for through some challenges. And after that mentorship, you sort of become like good at like better at the people side, if you will, and then you'll often be formally given a role to lead people. So you can see there's quite a journey to get there. And I'll even go further to say that one of the things that's exciting me is that there's actually the advent of the independent contributor track within product management that you never directly manage people, but you're able to continuously build your influence and drive greater impact in the organization without ever having to manage people. So short answer, be patient, look at first driving impact through continuously utilizing and developing your skills and let others see that leadership emerge and embrace every opportunity to mentor and help others, and it will come.
I love that. You know, one of the things that I've always seen be really challenging is getting product managers to get feedback on themselves, right? And it's almost like if you were thinking about your career as a product, your stakeholders are kind of your peers, your managers, maybe, you know, and it's, I got into this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago where I was working with some really great sales guys. And every single time they'd have a meeting, they would send a form and go, okay, what do you think we said? I mean, they wouldn't use those words, but it'd be something like this, hey, it's basically a comprehension test. So a few years ago, I was working with this great sales team, and they're absolutely phenomenal. And one of the things I picked up from them is when they would have a session, well, firstly, what they did was they got everybody in the room to leave their phones in a box. They couldn't be in a presentation by a product manager and not give their phones up. Now, I guess in sales teams you can kind of push that through. Maybe product teams are like, huh? Like, anyway, but they were really great at that. And then what this guy taught me was, okay, Ross, you presented the Q3 roadmap, for example. I can't remember what it was, but you presented the Q3 roadmap. Now we're going to send a form to everybody who's in their presentation and basically ask them things like, hey, in the Q3 roadmap, what are you most looking forward to? What are you least looking forward to? Are there any other suggestions? Really what that was, as I just mentioned, it's a really kind of sneaky comprehension test. And the amazing thing for me was what I thought I said, what I thought they understood of what I said, and what they came back and said. And there's always that delta, there's that mismatch of it. But oh my God, I grew so much as a product manager because I realized I was talking about all these things that I thought were so awesome and exciting, and it just wasn't landing. So I could then improve, practice,
Absolutely.
change. Boom. Does that gel with what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. I think actually more than anything, I think one of the game changers for product managers is to actually realize what you said, which is if I can treat myself, my product career as a product, and what does that mean for your mindset around that? That's a powerful paradigm shift that can really set you up on a very, very different path. What it meant for me was actually failure might happen. Failure can happen. In fact, learning is what's really important. It meant that I had to be much more iterative in like the things I was thinking about doing. I wanted to try new things or see if I could develop skills. I had to prioritize what am I going to like focus on next in terms of as my development. And it absolutely meant that I had to be open and embrace feedback. And that's a hard journey because we generally shy away from being told negative things, and we don't like hearing. And it's not all feedback has to be negative. I think that's actually one of the problems is that we tend to always just focus on the negative. But when you do get that feedback, it can be transformative. But the problem, frankly, is that we do it too infrequently, and we wait until small little things become big problems, Or in your case, we miss the opportunity of just doing that real-time check-in. Right now, how am I doing on this? And now I can make little tweaks instead of like, I got these major character flaws I need to address. Like, that's what happens when you have a 6 months in between performance reviews before you learn anything. It's ridiculous. No, seek the feedback incrementally in small little pieces, and you'll see like the whole kind of fear of getting that feedback goes away, because hey, all I'm doing is seeing just how well that meeting went. But over like 7 or 8 meetings, I'm learning something about my communication style, and I'm able to adapt a little bit each time. That's just a great example of that mindset at work of, hey, I'm a product, and I need to, iterate. I have customers. I have to like continuously improve. I have to and another a piece of advice to really extend that out is, I as a product manager need to think about what my value proposition is for my organization or for my potential employer, and even one step further, my differentiation. What do you uniquely get from me by employing me or putting me on that interesting project? Really thinking in those sorts of terms is very, very powerful.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. Wow,
Happy
that's so
to.
powerful. So yeah, I coached a lot of people in product now, and I remember someone came to me and they were like, there's that phrase, I think it's Seth Godin's, like, better to be meaningful specific than a wandering generality, right? And I remember this product manager came to me and they were like, oh, they could do this. What about fintech? Fintech's really growing. But it turned out they'd done quite a few things in life sciences. And we kind of rejiggled their CV and LinkedIn profile and everything to just focus on their, just call it a North Star metric, if you will. It's not, but it sounds good. And we kind of just focus on that, and they got this incredible, then they got a great job in epidemiology, and then they got this biotech firm reached out to them with a huge amount where they were for them. And I don't want to mention numbers or anything, but and initially they were thinking like, aren't I kind of pigeonholing myself? And it was, well, hang on a second. Firstly, you are incredibly skilled at this. So you going against someone in fintech who's been in fintech, whereas you've been in life sciences, doesn't really make much sense. Secondly, there are very few people, when you're talking about differentiating yourself, there are very few people who've got all your experience here. So why not leverage that and double down on it, right? And I think a lot of people kind of feel like they are, let's say, like leaving money on the table because they think, oh, there's that other job, there's that other thing. There's 2 other things I want to just kind of talk on or touch on briefly. One is also when I've been coaching people, and I used to do that with my direct reports, is we'd get together and talk about like one big thing we're working on this week. It wasn't about our sprints, it had nothing to do with engineering. It was one big thing we're working on that's going to move ourselves and our career and everything forward. It wasn't about, it could have been like, I'm doing a public speaking course, I'm presenting, but it couldn't be something like, well, I've got a stand-up or a sprint retrospective. That's just BAU, right? That's just business as usual stuff. It was their one big thing. And that was phenomenal because, like I said, in a quarter, you get 12 one big things, right? So you get 12 big things that you should be moving the needle forward for, that you can look back. The third thing, and listeners of this podcast have heard this loads and loads of time, is I always talk about the product scorecard, right? Like, take an audit of your product. Like, work out, like, where are you with stakeholder management? Where are you with roadmaps? Where are you with, whatever's necessary, and try and give it a metric. And I've got this whole PDF where I kind of give everything a score out of 10, and you kind of total it up, like, let's say out of 800, and you've got 467, but then you can focus on how you're going to get to 600 or whatever it is.
That's right.
But I think what's even more important in that, because that's all fairly arbitrary, is to going back to what you said, is when you go back to your manager and you go back to your colleagues and you say, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm improving it. I've never had one person come back and say like, well, firstly, no, we don't want you to do it. But everyone's like, wow, you're actually taking ownership and leadership of your product and showing as well. And the other knock-on effect that's had that I didn't realize when I came up with it, but in retrospect, I should have, it's so obvious, is when you're pitching yourself and differentiating yourselves in a role, you're saying, hey, I created this product scorecard and I increased about 20%. I was able to get better stakeholder management, all this, and we went from a score of 447 to 867, whatever it is, right? Anyway, so I think those three things, just as you were talking, it just reminded me of a lot of the things that I would do in my coaching practice with product managers. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff there. I think I will first talk about the domain, the differentiation on the domain side. That's brilliant. Like, I am a big fan. I talk about it in the book a lot. In fact, there's a whole chapter on kind of the mindsets of product management and the four different things you need to be constantly thinking of. But I do say it's important to play to your strengths. And knowing what your strengths are and doubling down on those are often the easiest path forward in your career, in growth, than focusing purely on the things that you might be struggling with, or that you might want to go. Like, maybe there's someone who's you admire is going off and joining a company and just saying, oh, I want to do the same thing. That's not the right way to think about it. I will say that two things. First of all, that it's important to follow passion at some level. So it's important that person have been passionate about bio and not like passionate about fintech and sort of just good at bio, and because they will burn out. They might be very good at it, but like, unless they're super passionate getting up in the morning every day thinking about it, it's going to be a struggle. But in the case you gave, it sounded more like that they were enamored with, oh, there's this potential, like all this excitement in the fintech sector, I want to get into it. And that would be the wrong thing to do. Follow instead a path that follows your passion, and the rest will actually, often come, not always, but it will often come. And you will love your job, and someone's going to pay you well for your specialization as well as your general skills. So that's one thing. Domain is also only one way you can differentiate yourself. So I'm actually a case study in this, because I've worked in media, advertising technology, SaaS, consumer, mobile, large companies, small companies, ed tech, and healthcare. And I'm all over the map from a domain expertise perspective. But what I've chosen to differentiate myself in is being able to help organizations that are going through growth or transformation build their product practice. That includes what I do today in coaching, in terms of helping layer in product planning and I don't want to use the word process because it sounds like it's all very heavy, but it's not. It's systems that actually help you be better product managers, attract better product managers, and build better products. Like, that's how I differentiate myself for companies that are going through kind of that through scale growth transformation, where they just don't have those skills in place. Now, what I've found is that there's a lot of demand in that, and I work at any one point in time with half a dozen organizations, helping them through that transformation. Now, that's what I found I've excelled at, and I'm very passionate about it, because I have this personal mission that I want to improve the practice of product management wherever I find it. So we can be building better products and creating greater value for our customers and the world more generally. Very lofty vision, but I've been able to really carve out something for it. So domain is one differentiation. You can differentiate on skills, company types. You can differentiate in a couple of different ways. So that's my response on the first one. In the later case, it sounded like you were encouraging people to, first of all, identify what really mattered and say it out loud, and kind of really be prepared to kind of talk about their focus, if you will, and then even like score themselves and talk about like the continuous improvement. Now, what I see there is you're setting up this really interesting kind of positive loop where it's a growth mindset. right? I always have to find something that's going to be very important to move forward. Now, there's an important aspect of prioritization and focus there, which is a core product skill. It's not like they came in with seven big, initiatives each week.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that really matters? By voicing it also, you create an environment inadvertently or deliberately where there's now mutual accountability. It's like, I heard you say that. I heard you say that you're going to move this forward, and that's now going to be like, if you come in next week and say the same thing, I'm going to be like, dude, what's going on? And then you also help them in a quantified way in this respect. Look at and critically assess across the board, and it's not like I'm going to be perfect at everything. It's always like there's something I can get better at all the time, and then there's that kind of almost gamification of seeing a number going up over time, and then it's sort of constantly doing that loop every week is very, very powerful. I actually talk a lot about those sorts of dynamics. I don't call them out maybe as conceptually as I just did, but things like retrospectives on a regular basis is very important, constantly looking to get better as a team. I talk about like the importance of lightweight interviews and conversations, keeping it as simple as possible. So because there's not this big overhead of having to go and like recruit and plan prototypes and do all sorts of artifacts just for interviewing. Just go and talk to customers. If it's a consumer company, try to talk to 5 every 2 weeks and iteratively just learn. Those sorts of loops of always be learning, but trying to keep it smooth and time bound is a very, very, very powerful dynamic. So I hope that kind of made sense, but that's kind of what I spotted when you were describing the system that you'd set up in terms of getting people to think about what do I need to really own and improve, and then coming back and being accountable to it.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. It's at least in my mind trying to create those virtuous cycles, right, as opposed to vicious
Right.
cycles that kind of hopefully just build on themselves with positive habits, as you say, growth mindset. And to me, the best way I've ever been able to approach growth mindsets or trying to work out what from the book Antifragile growth mindset. And I think the best way to do this, and this is getting very heady and lofty and stuff, but
That's right.
but hey, I've got a degree in philosophy, so there you go. So I think one of the best ways to create a growth mindset that is anti-fragile, which means like the more, let's say, stress you put on it, the better it can potentially get, at least conceptually, is the mindset of a learner. I think that if you're a product manager and you don't have the mindset of, hey, we're learning stuff, firstly, it's probably not the role for you. And maybe, as you said, like with the passion thing, that potentially could burn out really quickly. And the other thing I really liked, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase a little bit of what you said, like instead of maybe looking for a vertical, like a life sciences, fintech, whatever, you almost found a horizontal, right?
That's
A
right.
horizontal over many, many verticals, but high growth companies that really need specific skills. And I think that's awesome because a lot of the time, people don't do that, or they don't look horizontally. They might just look vertically. I think that's amazing. So, I mean,
Thank you.
other times, other people I've worked with just look at working with like really, really large corporates. That are, I don't know, just massive, that really need to understand product. I've had some people that have worked in those environments, so that's that's a really, really great example, Ken.
Excellent.
What else? Well, what else?
I do think it's important that people, if I do think it's important that you look for what might make you successful there, like what your differentiation is. But at the same time, I want to be clear. I kind of discovered that. I didn't like identify it and it's out good. I'm going to go do this, and that's another aspect. And it's connecting back to the learning point is at some point I kind of stopped worrying too much about it and saying, okay, where am I feeling and thinking sort of from the gut, but also from the head. Where am I going, and what is unique about this value? And I kind of looked back at my career and I was like, wait, this hasn't been like a complete mess. There's actually a story here. I can actually see the pattern emerge, but sometimes you can't see forward and see that pattern
Yeah.
until you kind of are there. And so being comfortable also with trying new things, jumping around a little bit is okay. Taking a couple of risks is absolutely, I think, part of it if you want to discover that.
I think people struggle with that. I mean, I've worked with people where, I've had conversations with people who, I remember this one really good friend of mine where they were working in this organization where they were, or she admitted she was being bullied by another female colleague of hers, and that was really uncomfortable, and she was like bitterly unhappy. But she said, but I can't leave the company because I've only been here for like 4 months, and it's going to look at my CV as if I've like as if I wasn't committed or something like that, which was really unfortunate. But thank God she listened and took some advice, and she's moved on and found actually a really, really great role for her.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah,
got to be happy.
you do. I mean, and that goes back to your passion, right? Because if you haven't got at least some passion in that area, when the going gets tough, when things get really hard, you're going to burn out, or feel burnt out. You're going to feel like this, like I just don't have, the energy to push through. And sometimes, some people will come to me and we'll be chatting, and it'll be like, maybe this is the wrong role for you, man.
Yeah.
If this kind of thing is really going to get you down and depressed, or feeling like it's just about delivery, or it's just about this, I don't think product management is for everybody. I think it's one of the best roles in the world, but again, it really isn't for everybody, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And I mean, I teach product management at UC Berkeley, and I actually teach undergrads and master students, and they've not ever really worked before. And I make it. I've realized that the value that course is bringing is of the natural product managers of the group. I might accelerate them a little bit. I might help them on their way a little bit. I might
Sure.
confirm in their mind. For the groups of people that sort of maybe people who will work with product managers, like the future engineers, the designers, they're like, oh, I kind of understand more about what product management does. But there's always a group as well that like, I kind of turn off product management. Like they walk out saying, actually, I've learned this is not for me. And I get them to write a little reflection paper at the end of the class, and it's just
Oh,
some
really?
of them are like that. And I'm like, I'm actually glad that I've helped you realize that that's going to be a really difficult role for you to do, because for whatever reason, um, uh, that you're welcome, right? You can go on your way to something else instead. And so learning that's one of the things, learning quickly, like what really is going to be the right role for you and what isn't. But also you said something else that's very important, which is when the going gets tough, not giving up either. And product managers are generally very, very resilient. Whether we're resilient at the beginning, but we're certainly resilient at the end. And you just have to roll with it. Like there's going to be a lot of things coming at you. Every day you have some metric going wrong, or some deployment that didn't work, or a stakeholder that's in your ear, and you just got to be ready to sort of cheerily and optimistically work your way through that. And what I constantly remind myself is when I'm having those sorts of days is I wouldn't choose to do anything else, because in this role I'm a kind of a force multiplier. I can bring together the skills of many people, collaborate together, and actually change something meaningful for an end user and solve a problem that they've been struggling with. And that's fantastic. Like the fact that I can do that almost every day, no matter how hard it gets going, that really keeps me going. We're
That's
problem
awesome.
solvers.
No, it's amazing. I was chatting to someone about it last week, and it's like how product management makes them feel like they can make their own, in their words, their own little dent in the universe, right?
There you go.
And
It's a much more eloquent way of saying it than my own. I
no,
just want to
I don't
touch back
know.
on. I just want to touch back on the learning. I think this is a really important paradigm shift, or something mentally you just have to like upload and say, okay, I understand that product management is partly about learning. And in the Influential Product Manager, I talk a lot about what happens, that little subtle thing when you sort of shift effectively when you restate your, shall I say, your product ideas in terms of hypotheses. There's a subtle shift in your mentality and how you go about working that is an influential technique in that you now no longer have to be right. It's just a hypothesis. So I can now personally not be have to associate my personal reputation with that thing that I want to deliver working, right? I don't make commitments that this thing is absolutely going to work. It's a hypothesis. And some organizations are going to push back on that, but even within your own team, stating things as a hypothesis is very, very important. The other aspect of doing that is it allows you to talk more in terms of what are we learning, as opposed to is this working or not, or what are we delivering, and when are we going to deliver it by? Because you can now iterate, you can now talk about like what's necessary to validate or invalidate our hypothesis next. You can talk. You can use that as a foundation to talk to more customers, understand and learn more, and find that to be a valuable activity other than hands-on keyboards pumping out code. So I am a big proponent to changing the way that we state our initiatives, if you will, in terms of hypotheses, success criteria, what would success look like for us, and then right at the end I have a little like template that I like to use, very lightweight, sort of a couple pager sort of encapsulation of the hypothesis and what we're trying to actually achieve here and for whom. Right at the end of it, it's what do we learn? Okay, so whether or not the project or the A/B test worked or not, what did we learn from that, and how do we carry forth those learnings into the organization? Those are just, I found that mindset change of we work in terms of evaluating hypotheses and trying to learn has been very, very powerful. It's not for every organization, but teams that operate that way, I think, have a little bit of an easier time at it.
I hear you. I was talking to some co-founders of a startup last week, and we were talking about things. We were throwing ideas out, and one person was kind of like, "No, I don't think I want to do this," or I don't think I want to do that." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool." So, and they were like, "Do you disagree?" I was like, "I don't agree or disagree at the moment. Like, I don't have I don't have a dog in the race, right? It's like I want to know whether that's right or wrong, and I want to know how do we test that, right? Because you're saying that oh, you definitely don't want to do this because of X. My view is maybe you're right, maybe you're not, but we need to find out, right? I don't. It's like what's it saying? Like strong beliefs, loosely held, right?
Oh yes.
It's like
I do find, Ross, that anyone who actually says that to me may think that's what they are, but usually I'm like, no, you're probably the strongly held, strong belief, strongly held person. I've definitely run into my fair share of people who say, oh, I have like strong opinions, loosely held, and I later learn that they really don't.
Yeah. But yeah, I must say in this case, okay, firstly, the guy didn't use the phrase, but he was open to kind of going like, well, okay, like let's check it out.
But
Like,
what you've done there, like that's the exact, like that's influence. That's like having impact. Like you've changed somebody's way of even thinking about the conversation. You've had an opportunity also for a stakeholder to kind of understand that their opinions are just their opinions, right? And you can step back and say, I just want to learn. I want to figure out what would be the right path forward or the best path forward, and sort of go from there. Product management's messy, you have to find the path, and it could be many answers could be right. So just a lot in what you did there that I think I would love to see more of that happening, particularly when product managers, and this is going to be an important challenge for your product managers who are looking to go up in their careers, is how do you engage stakeholders around their opinions when they're frankly strongly held, and you're maybe not in a learning environment, like how do you deal with those is really challenging. It's like how do you say no nicely kind of thing. What's on the table? How do you start actually building trust to say enough to them is like, well, that's your opinion. Can we break this into a smaller increment and run a test to learn? Or if we do that, let's understand the trade-offs to the other priorities we've already decided. Like, how do you engage them in those sorts of discussions so they understand that just because they have an opinion doesn't mean that you as the product manager, which is a rookie mistake, are the order taker, run back to your team and
Yeah.
implement it. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you engage them in a very respectful pushback conversation?
Yeah, I have seen that with more junior product managers coming up, where they will kind of be like, oh, like CEO said this, we got to do it. Like,
It's the worst reason.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah,
But it's valid, right? Because like, that you're worried about your career. It's actually a little crisis, right? Because
yeah,
if I try to push back or say no, or like, particularly if it's just my own opinion,
yeah,
that's not great for your career development. So the easy answer is I'll do what the boss wants. When I think the right answer is, as an influential product manager, how do I go find the right data
mm,
to bring to the table to change the nature of the conversation? How do I
mm,
contextualize what's going on and then make recommendations for paths forward that allows everyone to kind of get close to what they want, or at least a compromise that is the right thing for the business and the customer. It's a real skill. I could probably do another three sort of discussions just on like the techniques that I've learned work, and particularly the ones that don't work.
yeah. No, yeah. It's maybe we should do that. Maybe we should reschedule that.
Yeah, let's
But
do it.
I think the one thing that I would add to that discussion, rightly, or wrongly, is confidence. And have you got the confidence to question that? And if you don't have the confidence to question it, and if you do become an order taker, I would argue that your product career isn't going to be all that it can be, because you're not going to get the influence that you should have. And I think you do need to have the confidence in yourself to know that, what, if you tried it, maybe this isn't the right role. Maybe
Hmm.
this isn't the right company. Because if you're going to people and saying, look, Mr., Mrs., whatever, stakeholder person, I'd really like to check that out. I'd like to test that. Would you be open to doing that? Yeah, do it politely and confidently, but respectfully, would you be willing to do that? And if the answer is no, or what will happen is usually, I think, is, look, I've been here for 20 years. I know it's just the right thing to do. It is, it is, it is. Don't come to. And if you're going, cool, I get that. I totally respect that. I love the fact that you've been around, everything, you've been around the block. But we're not seeing these results and stuff like. But would you then be at least open to trying that? Are you confident enough to be unconfident, or to be flexible enough to try it for a minute or two? And if the answer then is no, or yes, begrudgingly, and I'm going to cut you off at the knees every opportunity I get, and then tell you how right I was when it didn't work, maybe you need to move to a different team or a different organization and have the
Yeah.
confidence to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're kind of touching on sort of another aspect of being a great product manager is also knowing there are things in your environment you may not be able to control, and then deciding on what am I going to do about that? Like, what is what I mean, the obvious one is I never have enough resources, or I have a very difficult stakeholder that's very much like they see product managers as people that they tell solutions that they've spoken to. They can't walk out of a customer's like meeting and then straight to the product manager saying, you need to build this so I can sell this thing. You're not going to re-educate, change the culture. It's just not very easy to do. So you have to decide on, what am I able to do? Is this going to be an area, is this going to be enough for me? And what I mean by enough is like, can I grow here still? And if I can do that, then fine, put up with it. get things that you can ship, point to driving impact, and then go find something else. For me, actually, I think that the key is no matter what environment you're in, when that environment stops you from being able to grow, that's definitely the time to leave.
Yeah. And you're right. And I think if product managers were looking at themselves and their careers as a product, I think it's looking and realizing, yeah, your stakeholders or your customers are not buying this product. Let's move on. So
Let's move on.
yeah, and I think that's tough. I think that's tough for a lot of people. You know, people who've got families or people who've got whatever to support. Eating, for example, to support. It's tough when you kind of think that, well, how do you know when your next role might pop up? But I think the one thing though that I'm seeing, at least in people I'm talking to in the States and in the UK and various other countries, is the product management market is so buoyant at the moment as far as from a recruiting perspective. You know, there are so many roles out there. If you can package your CV, package yourself, differentiate yourself, as you said, Ken, the roles are there. I believe
Absolutely.
so.
Absolutely. And I do a lot of recruiting for various companies, and I've noticed really a real lack of thoughtful packaging of somebody's skills when they're applying for roles. And it's a bit, frankly, it's just too easy. They just hit a button, upload the resume, I'm done. Oh, I've applied for that role. Then they're sort of wondering why they're not getting callbacks. And I can tell when somebody's actually made effort because they think about the role, that they're thinking about how, even if they don't have like all of the hard skills on their resume, they've thought about like times that they can talk about demonstrating great communication skills. But they might have been working more like on a sales, like engineering role. But they can actually talk to, oh, I can draw that attribute out and talk about it because I know it's a core skill for a product manager. I don't need to have had 4 or 5 years of product management to be able to prove that I can communicate, right?
Sure, sure.
Thoughtfully thinking about the different skills that are necessary for the role. There's plenty of resources that have that, and then sitting down and actually saying, how do I demonstrate this skill and talk about this skill in my resume and also obviously in any interviews, you can get into like a better role, if you will. There is a lot out there, but I also see a lot of people just applying and just objectively you look at it and I can tell that they may have the skills, but they haven't shown me and there's no track to I started here and here's why product management at your company is the next logical thing for me. I'll also say a lot of companies struggle to hire product management because we don't yet have still a great understanding, as we've even been talking about it, like stakeholders who think product management is somebody who goes and works with engineers to get a whole bunch of things done. They struggle to understand of how to even evaluate a product manager and to see behind the story. And so that's why I find some companies default to, well, I need 5 years of experience in this domain because I'm in fintech, I want fintech. And I'm like, well, do you? Sometimes actually I can count and tell you that it happens very frequently. You actually want fresh blood or fresh thinking, but you need those underlying skills. So critically looking at these things is really hard on both sides for people hiring and for people applying. We're not doing a good job of really matching and understanding and matching those skills. And so that's why, in part, why it's still very hard with all these roles out here for people to still break into, product management. There is a group that I've been working with recently that we just started called the Association of Product Professionals. And one of the very first things we've done is actually sit down and talk about and we have representation from Europe, US, Australia. We're all trying to kind of sit down and say, okay, what what makes an awesome product manager, and what's the skills, and how do those potentially manifest themselves. And the first sort of iteration of the product there is through a membership, you can actually evaluate where you stand and get very clear recommendations of these are areas that you're really strong at, your differentiation. Here's areas that you need to work at, and here are some resources. And so it's starting to really take off. But I think the need was there because we literally didn't have the common language of what a great product manager is and does and has, and what driving impact looks like, those sorts of things.
Cool. That sounds amazing. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, which will be great. So, Ken, it's been really, really wonderful getting to know you today and listening to you. It's been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed it. Time has really, really flown by. If people want to know more about you, where can they go to learn more?
Sure. Go to influentialpm.com. That's where you can learn more about the book, but more importantly, there's a whole series of talks I've given. There's also some product management resources, some tools that I've used over time, and I just happy for people just to be able to download those for free and try them out. So there's a whole lot of different things there, from metrics and roadmaps and things like that. And the talks are a lot of going into detail about various topics covered in the book. So influentialpm.com. And if you also want to, really always happy to connect over LinkedIn with anybody in the profession. Happy. I might take a little time to connect and answer your questions, but always happy to meet people, connect to people, and keep up to date. So that's just LinkedIn/in/Ken Sandy, KENSANDY, and you should be able to find me easy enough that way.
Cool. I'll add that to the show notes and post this on LinkedIn when it goes live and stuff, which I'm really looking forward to. So, Ken, it's been really great having you here so much. I'd love to continue this another time. And
me too, Russ.
Brilliant. And for everybody watching, you've just been watching the Product Coach Podcast with me, Ross Webb. And a huge thank you to Ken Sandy for joining me with the discussion. I thought it was really, really great. And I especially enjoyed our discussion about differentiation as a product manager. And if you get a chance to look for Ken's book, I think it's on Amazon as well. Check it out, The Influential Product Manager. And check out our show notes and links on our site, theproduct.coach/blog. And remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email at ross@theproduct.coach, or reach out to Ken, as he suggested. He said he'll get back to you. So check that out. And I look forward to hearing from you. Always appreciate your DMs on LinkedIn, and looking forward to having you with us next time on the Product Coach Podcast. And Ken Sandy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ross.
And bye for now.